Edward's hands, once nimble and strong, trembled as he poured his morning tea. He was a retired music teacher, his life dedicated to nurturing young talents. Now his small apartment echoed with silence. The only companions he had were the ghosts of melodies past and the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. Edward missed the bright smiles of his students. He missed the joy of sharing his passion for music. His days were quiet, filled with routine and the bitter taste of solitude. He yearned for a familiar face, a warm touch, a kind word. But the world, it seemed, had moved on without him. Edward often lost himself in memories, clinging to the echoes of a life well lived. He picked up a faded photograph from the mantelpiece. It showed him surrounded by a group of beaming children, instruments in hand. He pointed to a girl with pigtails, her smile infectious. "That's Lily," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. She could play Chopin like an angel. His apartment, once filled with the joyous chaos of music lessons, now felt oppressively quiet. The piano in the corner sat silent, its keys covered in a thin layer of dust. Sheet music, once lovingly annotated, lay scattered on a nearby table. Each object held a memory, a reminder of a life that felt increasingly distant. Edward's gaze drifted towards the window. Outside, children played in the park, their laughter carried on the breeze. He watched them, a pang of longing in his chest. He wished he could join them, to share in their youthful exuberance, but he felt invisible, a ghost, observing the world from a distance. Suddenly, a glint of light caught Edward's eye. It came from the corner of the room where his old guitar lay forgotten in its case. He hadn't played in years, his fingers stiff and uncooperative, but something about the instrument's gentle gleam beckoned him. With a shaking hand, he reached for the guitar case, his fingers tracing the worn leather. Memories flooded back of youthful dreams of serenading loved ones, of the sheer joy of creating music. He lifted the guitar from its case, its wood smooth and cool against his skin. As his fingers brushed against the strings, a familiar melody came to mind. It was a simple tune, one he had taught to countless students over the years. But as he began to play, the notes resonated with a depth of emotion he hadn't felt in years. The music swelled, filling every corner of the small apartment. It seemed to seep into the walls, transforming the humble dwelling into a grand concert hall. Edward, lost in his performance, didn't notice the light that began to emanate from his fingertips. Bathing the room in an ethereal glow, he continued to play, his fingers dancing effortlessly across the strings. The music grew in intensity, a powerful crescendo that shook the very foundation of the building. The walls around him seemed to dissolve, replaced by a swirling vortex of colors and light. Edward opened his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. He was no longer in his cramped apartment. He stood in a vast hall, its ceiling lost in a sky filled with shimmering stars. Pillars of marble stretched towards the heavens, their surfaces adorned with intricate carvings. He felt a surge of energy coursing through him, a vitality he had long forgotten. A familiar melody drifted through the air, its notes both comforting and exhilarating. Edward recognized the tune instantly. It was the same melody he had been playing on his guitar, but this was different. This was music on a celestial scale, played with an otherworldly beauty that sent shivers down his spine. He followed the sound, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he rounded a corner, he stopped, his breath catching in his throat. Before him stood a grand piano, its surface gleaming under a cascade of starlight. And seated at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys, was a young woman. Her hair, a cascade of auburn curls, framed a face both familiar and dear. Her eyes were closed, her expression one of pure joy as she coaxed the most beautiful music Edward had ever heard from the piano. He knew with a certainty that defied explanation that this was Lily, his star pupil. Lily smiled, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears. "Professor Edward," she whispered, her voice as clear and melodious as the music that filled the air. "It's so good to see you again." She rose from the piano, her movements graceful and fluid, and approached him. Edward reached out his hand, trembling with emotion. He wanted to speak, to tell her how proud he was, how much her music touched his soul, but words failed him. All he could do was gaze at her, his heart overflowing with a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Lily took his hand in hers, her touch warm and reassuring. "Don't you remember, Professor?" she asked gently. "Music is the language of the soul. It needs no words." She smiled again, her eyes shining with a love that encompassed a lifetime of shared passion. As Lily spoke, Edward felt a wave of peace wash over him. The music swelled once more, and Edward turned to see a chorus of angels assembling behind Lily. Their voices, pure and ethereal, blended with the celestial music, creating a symphony of sound that resonated deep within his soul. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him, carrying him away on a tide of pure joy. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the grand hall. He stood in a meadow, a carpet of wildflowers stretching out before him as far as the eye could see. The air was sweet with the scent of honeysuckle and lavender, and the sound of birdsong filled the air. Edward felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Lily standing beside him. She was no longer wearing her ethereal white gown, but a simple cotton dress, the kind she used to wear to his music lessons. She smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Welcome to heaven, Professor," she said, her voice filled with warmth and affection. As they walked through the meadow, hand in hand, Edward felt a sense of peace and contentment he had never known in life. The worries and regrets of his earthly existence seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. He was home, surrounded by beauty and love. They came to a small cottage, its walls covered in blooming roses. Music spilled from the open windows, a melody both familiar and comforting. Edward recognized the tune instantly. It was one of his own compositions, a piece he had written in his youth and long forgotten. Lily led him inside, and Edward gasped in amazement. The cottage was filled with instruments, pianos, violins, cellos, harps, and even a gleaming French horn. Sheet music littered every surface, and the air vibrated with the promise of countless melodies waiting to be played. Edward ran his hand over the smooth surface of a nearby piano, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had found his paradise, a place where music reigned supreme and his soul could soar. He turned to Lily, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Lily smiled back, her eyes filled with understanding. "You earned it, Professor," she said softly. "You dedicated your life to music and to sharing your gift with others. Now it's time for you to reap the rewards of your labor." Edward nodded, his heart filled with a peace he had never known before. News of Edward's passing spread quickly through his small community. His former students, now scattered across the globe, mourned the loss of their beloved teacher. They remembered his kindness, his passion, and his unwavering belief in their musical abilities. Many of them gathered in the old concert hall where Edward had held his annual recitals. They played his favorite pieces, their music a tribute to the man who had touched their lives so profoundly. As the final notes faded, a hush fell over the audience, and then someone began to clap. Soon, the entire hall erupted in applause, a thunderous ovation for the absent maestro. Tears streamed down the faces of many in the audience, but they were tears of gratitude and love, not of sorrow, for they knew that Edward's music and his legacy would live on in their hearts forever. Edward's story serves as a poignant reminder that even in solitude, the human spirit can find solace and redemption through the transformative power of art. His journey from a life of quiet despair to an eternity of harmonious bliss underscores the enduring impact we have on others and the profound ways in which our passions can shape not only our own lives, but also the lives of those we touch. The image of the lonely music teacher finding solace and ultimate liberation in his Final Symphony is a testament to the transcendent nature of music and its ability to connect us to something far greater than ourselves. It speaks to the profound beauty that can arise from even the most ordinary of lives when touched by the extraordinary power of art. As we navigate the complexities of our own lives, let us remember Edward's story and find inspiration in his unwavering dedication to his craft. Let us embrace the transformative power of art in all its forms and strive to create our own symphonies of meaning and connection, leaving behind a legacy that will continue to resonate long after we are gone.